Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa. I would rather say our daily session, our daily live streaming here at Connect Africa. Myself and Kwame. Trust me, we are. I mean, as much as there's a lot to do, we are so happy to be here and to deliver. This is what we love to do: to bring you information, to analyze, to give it that Pan-African perspective. So the minute we are here in front of our screen, we are so energized and happy to, to communicate with you. So tonight, there's something that really, it not slipped. We planned to do it, but because of the Niger coup, we kind of postponed it. That is the old Kissinger's, Henry Kissinger's visit in China and the number of U.S. officials visit to China. So we are going to analyze for that. Why are they there? I mean, in this you will learn how many of them have been in China. So what's going on with their foreign policy and everything? For that, as usual, to give us everything, how unreservedly. Our brother Pan-Africanist Kwame Gonza is here. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. Greetings to everyone who's watching us, and we want to welcome you once again today to the program. As usual, try and support the channel. We thank you very much for all who have supported the channel and have increasingly been part of us. We ask you that you help us to go out there and spread the African message as we do periodically, every week, every day. We have committed ourselves to be able to put out the African narrative, because the African voices, the voices of the African citizens, for somewhat or some reason, have been stifled even within the African continent itself. That you see that even our media houses in Africa have been taken over by Western control, that they only parrot the interests of the Western world, and this is very unfavorable. So that is why we came out to be able to put out the narrative of the Africans. So this is the very reason why you should support us, as you people who are watching on YouTube. We have seen that many media people, even in the West, are more powerful than the media houses. You can talk of different groups of people, so they are more powerful. Individuals are more powerful than the media houses, because that is where they get real information. People are very tired of the mainstream media. So we are here and we ask for your support, and we want to thank you for being part of us and supporting us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kwame. So we have seen, let's jump into this. We have seen Secretary Blinken, the Treasury Secretary Yellen, and now the old man, Henry Kissinger, have been in China. Actually, just a month ago, here at Connect Africa, myself and Kwame, we have analyzed Blinken's presence in China and what's happening. As we analyze this, as we discuss this, I'm going to put it in the chat section. So now, why Kissinger is there? So, first of all, Blinken, Yellen, and now Henry Kissinger. What's happening with the foreign policy of the United States? Is it failing? Where is it going? Yeah.
As you rightly mentioned, and as we know internationally, Kissinger has served in many governments since the 1960s. He's some sort of multi-generational civil servant in the United States. So he served on numerous governments, and he has been influential in the United States foreign policy area. He came up with a lot of policies which influence in the direction, the foreign policy of the United States. The direction of the foreign policy of the United States. So when, as they always say, that once you are a soldier, you always remain a soldier, that if your country needs you, it can always call on you. What we are seeing is that the United States has been facing, of course, a lot of challenges, and it's because of the way it has been handling. The new generation has been handling its foreign policy, and of course, you can even go as far back as the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. So it has been losing a lot of credibility, and of course, we saw how it withdrew from Afghanistan to in 2021. How Biden withdrew from Afghanistan. So all through these, people have stopped sort of respecting the United States, and they sort of do not take the United States in the same way they used to look at it. When their politicians come around, there's nothing much that is expected from them apart from peddling lies. But this also is symptomatic, of course, of the emergence of the information age, that people now can easily get information about you. People now know much more about the history of the United States and how it was built. So when we go to China now, because this is the focus, today's focus is China. These Secretary of States and different delegates have been going to China, and of course, you've mentioned Secretary Blinken. He was in China. When he went to China, they had wanted, after there was a couple of skirmishes in the South China Sea between the United States military and the Chinese and People's Liberation Army of China. The Americans wanted the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, to meet his counterpart, who's the Chinese Minister of Defense, in Singapore when there was a defense conference. But the Chinese refused. Why did the Chinese refuse? The Chinese refused because the United States has been doing a different thing and saying a different thing. So the Chinese demanded what they call sincerity. You have to be sincere. When you are approaching us, you have to be sincere. So in this, what they were saying is that the United States is lacking in the area of integrity. So when Blinken went to visit China, it is likely that he wanted to create that, connection, because the United States, as you remember, started, its war on China, economic war, starting with Trump, tariffs, and all that, and demonizing China, blackmailing, sanctioning some of Chinese companies. We saw Huawei, the manufacturing telecom company, which is manufacturing phones, that to a certain extent, it was able to overtake Samsung to a certain level, and the Americans saw this as a threat for Huawei to be the global leader in telecommunications, and they sanctioned it, and Huawei was reduced, from the point where it had even overtaken Samsung for some period, and it is now, it lost its position among the global manufacturers of phones. So the Chinese have been gathering all this information that and putting it together. Now, when the United States comes to China with demands, Secretary Blinken went there. What they told him, that you have to be sincere, that the Chinese are looking at you people when you start being sincere, because they are talking about de-escalating trade relations, but they are putting more Chinese companies on sanctions, and they are increasing the rhetoric of Chinese decoupling and encouraging their companies to come out of China. We've seen Apple trying to put up, new facilities in India and going out of China. So all this has some sort of angered the Chinese. Now, Blinken was not able to achieve the objectives that took him to China of rekindling that relationship with the Chinese. They were very hostile to him. Now, they sent in a woman. I think they wanted to see how they can do it. They sent in the Secretary of Treasury, who's like the Minister of Finance in the United States. They sent her in. I think there was some talk of China wants to sell its debt, which it has with the United States, which is almost up to $1 trillion. And this would affect, of course, the United States economy. China is the second biggest holder of United States debt. So if they sold their debt, is the second biggest holder of the United States debt. If they sold their debt, that means it would create some sort of inflation in the United States. Now, I believe that this is one of the reasons why they sent a secretary of Treasury. Secretary of Treasury, who's Janet Yellen, to go to China to be able to talk this out of the Chinese, and of course to also touch some of the areas which Secretary of State failed to achieve, to talk about those things which he failed to achieve. But it looks like the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, also was not that since she's a woman, they will be able to balance up that energy. But even that, they were not able to do it. Now, with that being said, that even Janet Yellen was not able to convince the Chinese government because the United States has been behaving in this way, sending military aircraft and spy aircraft in the South China Sea, in the Chinese airspace, sending military ships, warships in the South China Sea to try to provoke China. Because of all this, even Yellen would not take anything from the Chinese. So I think that is why they thought that now the only option which we are remaining with is the former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, who has been around and he has been an expert, and even he himself, Kissinger, was instrumental. After 1949, when China became independent and unified, it closed itself off from especially the West. But Kissinger was instrumental in re-establishing that relationship between China and the United States. And that was in the 1980s, 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. It was very instrumental during that period. I think that this is what they thought that he would be able to achieve for the United States, because they think that because the Chinese are long term, they view things in a long term. So they thought that they would respect Kissinger because he's an elder person, he's an old person. And of course, that is how, even when you look at President Xi Jinping, that is how they looked at Henry Kissinger. And of course, for Henry Kissinger, you can talk about him in the various crimes he has been in Latin America. He even also wrote a documentary. He wrote a document which was called the National Security Study Memorandum 200, which the United States has been using to minimize or to put down the population of the world, to control the population of the world. I think that document, you can find it even on the internet. Yeah, so he has these crimes that he has been involved in killing a lot of people. He has been an architect of killing a lot of people. But like I mentioned, in Latin America, I think including also in Africa, but mostly Latin America and Asia. But the Chinese, they thought that they need somebody who will be able to understand their position. So this is why the United States had to send in Henry Kissinger to be able to convince the Chinese. Now, whether he was successful, I think that will depend on the Americans. I don't believe that one person will be able to convince the Chinese to act in a way the United States wants if the United States doesn't reform in its behavior and its hypocrisy and how it is doing things all over the globe and destabilizing and provoking different countries, including China.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. So that was old Kissinger trying to make himself relevant again and re-establishing the relation between, not re-establishing, but trying to make it better, let's say. But yeah, I hope the Chinese are, as you said, looking at things carefully, and if they don't see a change in fundamental change in the behavior of the West, I don't think he's successful, but we will see. Time will tell. Now let's move to in the same topic to Europe, and Europe has been increasingly developing this anti-Chinese rhetoric, and we have seen, of course, and we have analyzed President Macron's visit to China, to Russia, and the things that he have been saying, as if or maybe I don't know, trying kind of decoupling him, not only France, but he was selling his ideology also to the European Union, the European Union not to be, not to get in the crisis of the U.S. And also in his footstep, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, I don't know the right pronunciation, but he has also done the same thing. Now, what could it be the change in rhetoric after these two people, meaning Macron and German Chancellor's visit to China?
Yeah, I think what the United States is trying to achieve here, even though, of course, we are talking about Europe, um, the United States is trying to see that Europe decouples with China, and of course, it would be very painful for China for some reason. I mean, it would be very painful. I mean, it would be very painful for Europe, not China, and of course, it would be painful for China also on one side. But I think the why Macron, when he came from Europe, he was able to make those statements whereby he was talking about how Europe should be able to determine its own position of foreign policy and have its own security, take care of its own security needs, which I don't believe is possible at this time, because Europe right now is almost a hostage to the United States. It is possible that the United States may be having its way, of course, because they depend, security-wise, they depend on the United States, and the United States, of course, has been bullying them to go in that same direction. So it is likely that the United States message is catching in. If you look at the start of the Ukraine war, for example, the United States wanted to go to this war, and the Europeans did not want to go to this war. That is why Macron was in Russia to try to negotiate with Putin so that the war could not go on, because he knew how it is going to affect Europe, and Europe has indeed been affected because the cost of production right now in Europe has gone up, because they are buying very expensive sources of energy instead of the cheap energy which was being consumed from Russia, which Russia was giving them at a much cheaper price. So they are now no more competitive on the global stage, and I think this is a trap which the United States has thrown them in. Germany right now, it cannot compete, its automobiles cannot compete. What we are seeing is that the Chinese vehicles now are flooding the world, because China has been getting the cheap oil, the cheap gas from Russia, and Europe now is getting the expensive gas from the United States and all the other, for example, India, which is repackaging that energy and giving it to Europe at a much higher price, and actually is getting it from Russia. So all this has made production in Europe extremely expensive, and we have seen that inflation also is high. Economic depression has been happening. Economies are contracting. The two major economies in Europe are contracting. We see France, we see Germany. The economies have been contracting. Now, this, to distract their populations, the only way to do is to start this rhetoric and increase their rhetoric towards negative rhetoric towards China, as China is the biggest enemy. And of course, you have been hearing them talking about de-risking. They are saying the same thing which the United States has been saying. They have taken the same rhetoric and narrative, is the same which they are throwing around, that they are trying to de-risk it from China. It is simply because Germany, which is the industrial powerhouse in Europe, depends on automobiles, and China is taking over that industry, that part of industry. And France is where you are making the Airbus aircraft, and China has also launched its own aircraft manufacturing, the C919. So now what they are doing is that in this loss, of course, which the United States has pushed them in this loss, they see that the only way is to convince their population that our problem is because of China, is not because of anyone. It is because of China. they do not want to mention that the United States has pushed that in this problem. And what I see is that if the United States continues pushing them in this direction, it will be even much worse if they say they want to decouple with China, because China is the biggest trade partner of Europe. So if they decouple, there will be loss of jobs. You know, of course, we are seeing that China is already taking over the automobile manufacturing. This has been extremely a big worry for Germany itself. Even recently, during the U.S. Africa summit, we saw that one of the luxury vehicles, two of the prominent luxury vehicles which featured, it was a vehicle which was made in Russia, which is the Urus Senat, and the second vehicle which featured at this summit, the the Russia Africa summit. Sorry, it is the Russia Africa summit. It was the Hongqi H9, which is a vehicle that is made in China, and these are the two vehicles which were used, to transport delegates to this, Russia Africa summit, which happened in St. Petersburg. So this shows you that Germany is losing a grip on the manufacturing of vehicles, because in the past, the luxury vehicles which were used, you talk of Mercedes-Benz, you talk of Audi, but now things now are turning around, and this becomes a worry. So, but for the United States, of course, it is looking out for its interest. It wants to contain, to see how it can convince China so that China will stop, supporting Russia, and on one side use India to confront China. So it wants to play everyone. So it thinks that if they can convince China in some way and they defeat Russia, actually they will just turn around and come to China and defeat China if China doesn't support Russia. And of course the strategy is the divide and conquer strategy, and they want to bring you along that, so that what we are seeing actually is that they are investing everything which they have, because for them this is a matter of life and death. They are losing the grip on the control of the world. And of course, these are similar to the things which we have already spoken about when we talked about the war, the coup in Niger. That fear, they are feeling that they are losing the grip of on the world, and the multipolar world is coming. It is the same thing which happened during colonialism. You saw that some of the colonial countries were still trying to hang on. They were not accepting that the colonial order is going. Portugal, they had to fight it out. In Africa, France, in some countries, they have to fight it out. So Spain and even Britain, the apartheid regime, we just expelled it, just recently in 1994. So all these, they thought that they would hang on. So that is the position in which the United States is. And it is unfortunate that it may go down with Europe if Europe doesn't want to take care of its own affairs, which is going to be very difficult, of course, for Europe, to distance itself and remove itself from the United States, because they are so much integrated that they have been working together. They have been attacking other countries together. So they are looked at in the same way if you look at what is happening across the world.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Indeed, interesting. And also, how everything is connected, how every move, every action, every dynamic that we are witnessing today, day and night, is so connected. It just asks for us, to make sense of it. It's not science.
So the sending of Kissinger, it plays in that, because the United States thinks that right now is the time to employ all types of resources. Whatever you have to employ it, even if it means sending to China a 90-year-old man like Kissinger. Send him. We have to put everything which we have on the line so that we can save our supremacy, this white supremacy, this colonialism which we have been perpetuating of consuming other people's resources. We have to make sure that we save, this, because if we do not, things are going to collapse in the United States, and people may eat us, or the United States, and this I predict here, is likely to disintegrate if it cannot save the colonial system which it has been perpetuating. The states are likely to disintegrate and be divided in different countries like California would go and form its country, because some of these states, they would not like to accommodate that chaos that may come from other poor states. So states like California may separate itself off and form their own country because it is rich, and then other states would go in that direction. So this is what they are trying to prevent that might happen if they lose control of the world. So they have to employ all types of resources which they have, including the old, the young, whoever can convince or can fight to be able to solve the situation for them.
Thank you, Kwame. So at last, as we always do, whatever is happening globally, Africa is part of the globe, so it affects us, it impacts Africa. Now, bringing this to Africa, how does this how do you say, it's the relation now between the China and U.S. is not good, or the West in general, also with Europe. How does this impact the relation between China and Africa? What does China's position mean when it comes to Africa's relationship with the West, also the other way? Yeah.
I think that our continent has to continue to be strategic in its engagement. That is one of the things which I can learn from this. Of course, we have just concluded the Russia-Africa summit. I think we have to be very strategic, and we have to play, foreign policy as a unit. We have to be integrated as Africans if we want to win and survive in this situation that we are engaged in. We have a lot of problems at home, but we cannot wait to finish all the problems at home. This is what I've always said consistently. We cannot wait until we finish solving the problems at home before we play on the international stage. Now, when we are engaging on the international stage, we have to move together. We have to fight, because our biggest challenge as Africans is at home. And that biggest challenge is not corruption, is not is us working together, fighting so that we can be able to work together. If we are engaging China, Russia, the United States, Turkey, we have to be working together. If we do not work together, we are opening doors for exploitation. That is number one, and it is very dangerous. We are opening doors for manipulation and exploitation. And our leaders on the other side, I think our heads of state, they have to play for the interest of the people. This business which we are seeing, that African Union, African heads of state, I love Ruto, I love President Ruto. He's been able to put out a very good, vision, a very clear vision for the African continent. But I think that they need enough information. You cannot just comment about issues like, for example, Niger, like how we came out and condemned the coup in Niger. I think our leaders need to play for the people, but they also need the right information. You cannot just come out and proclaim those statements like the AU and ECOWAS. They have, regardless of the fear they have of the United States and the Europeans, they have to play for the people. They have to defend the interest of the people. And this involves understanding what is going on the continent, all over the continent. This negligence, we have, people like President Museveni, who is looked at on the continent as an elder statesman with a lot of wisdom. He has not taken time to go out and visit these people and understand what is happening. I mean, this is the work of the elder statesman. I think this is the work he should be doing. Go out to Niger, go out to Burkina Faso, visit these guys and ask them what's the problem, and be able to understand really what challenges are they going on, and prevent, there's no one who said that East African community cannot move to the West African region and advise or talk to the leaders. This can be done. Or there's no one who said that President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has a reasonable, economy, and South Africa, which has a very strong foreign policy, cannot come to West Africa and advise if there's something which has to be advised, or talk to the people. You can move in and talk to the people, and talk to the leader, find out what the problem is, and this is what is missing. So we have to stick to our guns. If we have interests, we have to stick to them. This is what China is teaching us, that if you have your interest as Africans, stick to them, do not sell out. But unfortunately, some of the heads of state, they are selling out, like what President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso mentioned at the just ended Russia-Africa summit. That some of the African leaders, they are content on being puppets of the West. And this is very unfortunate that instead of supporting the people who are fighting against neo-colonialism, and this thing is being said even on the news, people are talking about it, that it is because of the French colonialism in West Africa. Even on NBC, an American news network, 24, France 24, people have been talking about these things, that is because of French colonialism and exploitation in Niger. That's why people have developed so much resentment towards France. So how can an African leader not know this if these things are being talked about on the mainstream media? So to some extent, they have neglected their duty for some reason, some for their selfishness, some because they fear. I think that what it teaches us is that we have to, we have to protect the interests of the African people. Number one interest of the African people should be upward economic and social mobility. Our lives have to be improved. The lives of the African people have to be improved, and it doesn't matter what means you use to improve those lives. You have to fight and improve those lives. This idea of hanging on and sticking to the narrative and slogans of democracy when democracy is not delivering, I think it has to be abandoned. That one, we should be able to speak it out as Africans in broad daylight when everyone is hearing that we will not accept the slogans of democracy if our lives are not improving. We are not enemies of democracy, but if that democracy is not delivering and that democracy allows our resources to be taken to Europe so that they can be used in Europe, we do not want that kind of democracy. Then we have to revise it. We have to find a system that takes care of our people and the people's lives are improved, that the resources of the African continent are used for the advancement of the lives of the African people, upward economic and social mobility for the African people. So China teaches us that you have to stick to your guns regardless of the consequences. So this fear and selfishness that some of the African heads of state have developed, that they gang up and try to put down the interests of the African people because they have some interest or they fear the United States and Europe. I mean, it has to be fought against, it has to be criticized, and African people have to speak up, against this kind of, inappropriate behavior. This, I call it inappropriate behavior, and it is very unacceptable.
Yeah, unfortunately, but indeed it is unacceptable. Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. So that was it for us for tonight in analyzing why U.S. officials are visiting China. We have seen three in this year: Blinken, Secretary Blinken, Secretary Yellen, and then also now Henrik Singer. So thank you very much for tuning in. Please, as soon as this streaming is over, share it to your network so that, as we always say, we can, information and knowledge is to empower each other, so we cannot just keep it for ourselves. For us, we always say it's bi-weekly, but we don't know what comes, and we always do our best really to be here every day, because there is a lot that's happening in the continent and outside the continent that impacts us, that impacts Africa and Africans. Yeah, please hit that, like, first of all, of course, subscribe, and then if you find it relevant to yourself, like it, and then share it, and hit that notification bell so that you will be notified whenever we have, sometimes we say bi-weekly, maybe we will be here tomorrow, we don't know. But for now, we'll see you on Thursday, and please support the channel. It will mean a lot to us. You will find it in the description section, our PayPal account, and furthermore, please keep on sharing. It's growing slowly, but we have seen a change. So for that, we are really grateful for you, and for those of you who are here every time when we are here, and for the love, the support, the engagement, the questions, every little thing counts. So and really with me also, all of you here, thank you. Let's say thank you to Kwame. He takes a lot of share in this, so thank you, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Yeah, so
and thank you to all who are watching.
All right. Have a good night. Ciao, ciao. Bye.